As Americans gear up for another presidential election, they also have to keep pace with changes in the media. That means fielding information from more outlets along with different slants and different levels of credibility. To help us sort out the options for making sense of the presidential primaries is an adjunct professor of media law at Emerson College and a principal partner with McManus Communications. We'd like to welcome Jim McManus. Thank you very much for being with us, Jim.
Hello, Chris. Good to see you again.
Jim, first of all, especially because you're at Emerson, you're dealing with young people, keeping track of this. What feels different about this year?
There's an energy among young people that feels very different this year. People have seen the last 3 or 4 years of kind of chaos and dysfunction, particularly at the national level, and they want to kind of have a voice, have their voice heard, and that feels different. They look to their political leaders, their political role models are, Alexandria Cortez in New York, and people, Ayanna Pressley here in Boston, people who are really have something to say to them, and they resonate with their messages. And so I think young people are getting more involved in politicking this year.
Well, you mentioned names like Presley and Ocasio-Cortez, and I see them all over the place on social media. And then I look at the results in New Hampshire. I'm saying this looks like it could have almost been the electorate back in 1988.
It's surprising, young people are getting out and voting, and who are they voting for? Bernie Sanders, the 70-something candidate from Vermont. But he has a message that's really meaningful for them. He's talking about free college and tuition forgiveness and student debt and health care for all. Those are really, that means something to people who are facing what they foresee as an uncertain future. And so we're also seeing a new generation of reporters, and I want to specifically mention some who are trained in the Boston area. We have some great Boston political reporters, we always have, and some of them have gone on, and they are, I think, the ones to follow over the next 6 months or so. The Matt Visors and Kyle Cheney, the Lauren Zazinski, Kim Atkins, those people learned their trade here in Boston covering politics, and now they've risen in their covering these presidential candidates in a very prominent way. Very smart. They're using social media. They're on Twitter. They're commenting on their stories, and I think they'll be important voices to follow over the next period as the campaign evolves.
What were you doing election night when those results were coming in from New Hampshire? Where were you? Watching TV? Were you on Twitter?
I was teaching that night, and I went home and tried to watch, and I was sitting there like a lot of people, wondering what was going on. It was so close between Sanders and Buttigieg, and then you saw some other candidates who, really kind of fell by the wayside, at least in New Hampshire. And we'll have to see whether or not they're able to recover. Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden in particular did not do well, considering Elizabeth Warren is well known to New Hampshire voters, being from Massachusetts, and Joe Biden has been a fixture on the national political scene for a long time. But he really did not connect with voters in the same way that Sanders and Buttigieg and Klobuchar did. And it was funny, the Sanders win in New Hampshire was kind of an interesting, following the reporting of that. He was clearly the winner in New Hampshire, but the other candidates kind of got more media attention. I remember listening to NPR on the way into work the next day, and they had audio clips of Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, but they didn't have an audio clip of Bernie Sanders, who won the election. Someone was saying the other day, Sanders is running against MSNBC because they're really not giving him the due that he has probably earned with voters.
Well, even on NPR, there is one take on this, basically, that his winning numbers were not nearly as impressive as they were 4 years ago against Hillary Clinton, and you see all these people voting for more moderate candidates, and it's all very convincing, but I also have a sense that the media are sort of ganging up on Sanders almost. Do you have that feeling?
I see that, yeah. I mean, it's really unfortunate, and I'm sure he feels that way too. He sometimes will, say something similar to reporters, saying, I'm not the most popular guy among reporters. And it's true, he does not have any close relationships, I think, with reporters, from what I understand. But he, he's been out there for a long time. He has a message to deliver, but he's not a friend of the media. He doesn't use the media in the same way that others do as a platform for getting their message out.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Jim McManus from Snowy McManus Communications. Jim, if you think back 4 years ago, the last presidential election, you know, there are people like you and me, we listen to all the pundits and we feel very wise, and then something happens that we just don't understand. There were things in that last election 4 years ago, maybe it was through social media. What should we be on the lookout this year?
One of the most dramatic developments, I think, is the change in Facebook. 2016, Facebook was one of the major platforms for people to get their news. That is not the case, I think, anymore. I think when Mark Zuckerberg announced that they're not going to curate content on Facebook, I think that really devalued Facebook as a news platform. Why would you listen? Why would you pay attention to anything you're seeing on Facebook if you don't know if it's true or not? And the people who are putting the content up there don't know or seemingly care if it's real or not.
You know, speaking of Facebook, I mean, one thing I do encounter, and it's not when I think I'm deliberately seeking out political coverage. I see ads. I have these friends who post these things that are sort of cookie-cut messages, and you know, I might not put a lot of credibility into them, but they're doing something to my brain. I mean, isn't that part of what social media does too?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think the main thing that people are going to have to be careful of this time, even more so than before, is being receptive to disinformation. We know that there are these disinformation campaigns being waged by people in other countries, by some candidates, particularly the president seems to be very much a fan of these kinds of efforts, and he's encouraging foreign governments to interfere. That's going to be part of what we need to watch out for this year.
Is there any one source you'd love to recommend to people to follow for this?
I ask my students, and they say they follow New York Times, they follow the Washington Post, they follow the BBC, and local news. I think it's important for people to pay attention to their local news sources, because that will give them an idea of who's speaking to them about the issues that they care about. You know, the Boston Globe here locally, if you're in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Atlanta Constitution, in the AJC in Atlanta. Those local papers are very important to inform people about what is going on in their communities and to kind of vet people as they try to emerge on the scene.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Chris. Bye.
Jim McManus. In a moment, we'll have the news from Dorchester with Bill Forey.